Scaling a practice is hard to sustain when the model heavily depends on you clinically. So most dentists don't have a clinical problem, they have a leadership problem. And they're typically trying to solve it with more dentistry. When you're still producing like I am and creating a significant portion of revenue and EBITDA, you're constantly pulled between being the producer and the leader. And it's not the dentistry that's the hard part. I think it's knowing that your team needs coaching and that your culture really needs to be reinforced. It's really hard to scale your business if you can't get out of the chair and lead your organization.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Dental Truth Project. We are very excited to have as our guest today, Corey Hastings. We'll get to his bio, introduction, and truth in a moment. But before we do that, I'm going to toss it over to Ken for our Ask Ken segment.
All right. Thank you, Dallin. We're excited to have Corey Hastings here with us, and this is going to be a great episode. So to get it started off, we had a question come in from one of our listeners that said, what's the biggest financial red flag that would make a buyer walk away from buying or affiliating with your dental group? So this is a very interesting question. There's a lot of potential red flags, but if I were to sort of organize this at the highest level, a potential buyer wants to see that you know how to grow your business and that there are systems and processes that are not too over dependent on any one person or any one specific skill set. They want to see that they're going to be buying and having the opportunity to grow the organization. Nobody wants to buy something and have it sit there and not grow in value. So that's the number one thing. And some of the other pieces of the puzzle that come with this is if you're doing a quality of earnings and there are a few bombs that kind of go off there, that's going to be a big problem. So that's why it's a lot of times smart to do a quality of earnings before you get engaged and you start to move forward, because you can start to maybe see if there are some challenges or problems that you might be able to work on or fix prior to a potential affiliation or any other type of merger type of situation. Also, if there's inconsistency in your collections, if the books are just messy, let's be clear here. Most buyers are financially driven. And as much as you may be a phenomenal provider, if you don't have the numbers down and if they're not completely locked in, it's going to cause some challenges for you. All right, Dallin, I'll pass it back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for that. All right, Corey, you are our guest today. Go ahead and give us a just quick intro to yourself, help our listeners know who you are and what you're doing, and then jump straight into the truth you want to share today.
Yeah, thank you guys both for having me on. Truly an honor. I'm Corey Hastings. I'm with Blue Sage Management Group. We're a 7-location organization, pediatric dental focused at this moment. And I've been in dental for 8 years coming up. I'm a practicing dentist. And my truth is we've gone from 1 to 7 locations. And the truth nobody's probably talking about is scaling a practice is hard to sustain when the model heavily depends on you clinically. So most dentists don't have a clinical problem, they have a leadership problem. And they're typically trying to solve it with more dentistry. And I've fallen, captive to that, right? And it really shows up as you grow. And you can only be at 1 location at a time. But your business, in our case, is in 7 locations, right? And so when you're still producing like I am and creating a significant portion of revenue and EBITDA, you're constantly pulled between being the producer and the leader. And it's not the dentistry that's the hard part. I think it's knowing that your team needs coaching and that your culture really needs to be reinforced. Like, I need to go to each location and breathe the life of the vision into each practice. But again, I'm sitting in the chair like we talked before we started. I'm sitting in the chair 5 days a week. That's hard to do. And so I can't be everywhere at once to do that at this moment. So I think that's the truth I want to talk about today is that it's really hard to scale your business if you can't get out of the chair and lead your organization, which is what I've done up to this point. And obviously taking steps to get to the next level and start scaling, but it's been a real big challenge going from 1 to 7 and kind of hit a ceiling without me stepping out.
Yeah, I want to throw something out here, Corey, and get your take on this, because this is something I've thought about a lot. And what's interesting is everybody talks about building a practice and building multiple practices and building a large DSO and everything else. But the number one constraint, I'm sure you're familiar with the constraint theory and things like that. The number one constraint is doctors. If everybody shows up and you've got all your supplies, everything's ready to go, but there's no doctors, there's no business. And so it's really something where it's like the doctor sometimes becomes the afterthought as opposed to, wait, they're the most important critical component of us actually running a successful dental practice. What responses do you have to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I've fallen guilty to that too. I've recruited these wonderful associates, and I have every intention of getting out of the chair and helping them, but then I fall back into the chair, right? And so it's become an afterthought. And now we're getting intentional about not making that the issue, right? We're going to get in, we're going to coach, especially nowadays. Like these new young docs, they don't get leadership training in school, right? Their success is measured by how well they study in a library, not talking to people, not leading people, not reading P&Ls, none of that. They're just in a library studying how to fill a Scantron, if that's still a thing, right? So I agree. We have to put the effort in as organizations. If you want stability in your group, into investing in the providers and your team, but really the providers, because without them, you don't have a service to provide, to your point.
Yep. Yeah. I think that makes tons of sense. And I can understand the dichotomy, or like how difficult of a choice that would be between leadership and producing. Because I mean, you started this group, you're a great clinician, you can produce a ton, like you've grown it from 1 to 7. I'm sure that the moment Dr. Corey Hastings steps away from the chair, revenue goes down. Like the practice just doesn't produce as much without the leading provider right there. And so it can feel really tough. It's like I could shift from 5 days down to 4. Like I could spend less time in the chair, and we've got lots of initiatives we need to do, but we really need cash this month, or like maybe in a little bit, the business will be in a better position to where I can step away. But for right now, we just still really need the money that we're bringing in. So I'm curious, because you've got a lot of years under your belt. You have gone from 1 to 7 locations. You brought up this problem, or this dichotomy. What are you doing to fix it? Or what have you found that's working?
Well, again, the hard part is there's a lot of people that rely on me, my team, my patients, my family, right? Mm-hmm. But I just have to be disciplined and allow my team to hold me accountable to coming out of the chair, right? They want it. So this gets even more complex when you kind of layer in, you're not coaching your team to be able to make choices, right? To execute. They want responsibility. They want to grow. They want to be leaders. But if you're not coaching them how to do that, they're indecisive. And so then it comes back to decision fatigue. So I've just committed, like I told my team, if I am scheduled more than 3 days, we have to find another provider. So recruiting's hard, right? Especially pediatric dentistry. Nobody wants to live in the Midwest. St. Louis is a great city, but nobody's convinced that they should be here. And so we finally are on a good path to having great providers that can come in and easily take over the revenue and the income. And you hear people talk about this, from 4 to 8 is really challenging to scale because of this problem. And so I've just made a conscious effort to say, hey, look, talk to my wife, like we're going to reduce our income a little bit, but this is really important for the group, and it's where it's at right now in order for it to grow. And so we're being very intentional about keeping me out of the chair. My team's holding me accountable so that I can then coach them and others to be leaders and grow this thing, so I'm not the bottleneck.
So Corey, an interesting statistic that I've watched over the years is the percentage of active dentists that are either affiliated with the DSO or have their own internal practice. And my understanding is we're right about a third of doctors that are expecting to be associates, and not necessarily hungry to, earn and learn in the same ways that you did when you became a doctor and then you built out your own practice and everything else. I'm curious for your thoughts about, first of all, that trend that's happening. But then second of all, what are you doing inside of your organization? Because obviously you've got to attract associates. If you want to grow your practice at this point and not, bring owners on and those sorts of things, associates are going to be the name of the game. I'm interested in how you're thinking about how to support them in a way that, you can continue to build and grow and, to whatever size or, whatever level of complexity you want.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there are more and more that are wanting more providers that are wanting work-life balance. And so the associate path is they're comfortable with, right? We've built our recruiting platform on having a clear path to ownership. So us pediatric dentists, we're a little crazy, right? Like not many people want to work with kids. And so we're what's next people. So, you graduate dental school. So then what's next? Pediatric dental residency. Now we're to the phase where a lot of pediatric dentists want to open their own practice, but there's a lot of risk there. It's more costly than ever. It's expensive. A lot of these providers are coming out with $500,000+ of student loans. I mean, mine was half that just 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And so we've created a model of ownership, a pathway that defrays a lot of the risk. They get the coaching, or they're going to get the coaching, right? As far as being a business owner, because again, most of us are retired microbiologists and none of us have a clue on how to be leaders. And so we're going to help coach that and again, provide stability by having more providers that are owners and being able to defray their risk as far as that ownership model that we're creating.
Yeah, there's definitely a need. Like you said, there are still some that want lifestyle. They don't want to necessarily own, but there are plenty that want to engage in that path of ownership. And, in dentistry, there can be some good opportunities to own and to grow over a period of time.
Yeah. So I'm curious, with everything that we've talked about here, if you were to talk to Corey Hastings at the beginning of his journey, if you were to look back to you at the beginning of starting this group, or maybe just talking to someone else at the beginning of starting their group, what advice would you have for them to guide them through the problems that we've talked about today? Give them a leg up.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I would slow down, right? I was provided some opportunities that I agreed to early on that really stretched me and my capacity, and it's economics of time. So I would slow down, get really intentional about my SOPs, and hire the right people that are going to help me grow and help me commit to getting out of the chair, right? One location per year isn't a big deal for some groups, right? But when you've only started with one or you started with zero, that's quite a bit, right? So it feels like we're moving at the speed of light sometimes. And I think I would go back and slow down just a little bit, be more intentional. But hindsight's 20/20. All right.
Yeah, it's difficult when your journey has made you who you are. And so how can you say, I would go back and change things? Because the way that you did things gave you the lessons that you needed to learn, turned you into the person that you are today. So ultimately, everything happens for us, not to us. No effort's wasted. It all turns to our good, but doesn't stop us from looking back every now and again and saying, man, I wish I could have done that a little bit different.
And we're doing those things now, right? We are slowing down to speed back up. And again, the pipeline for recruiting is finally a little more full than it's been. I mean, there's a drought for a long time, especially right after COVID, with some of these groups offering egregious amounts of bonus pay or compensation packages we just couldn't compete with. So I think now we're in a good spot, great providers that are wanting to learn and that are going to help us scale this. And I hope they don't fall into the same issue that I fell into, right? Because they're ultimately, or ideally, would be business owners in this group someday.
Yeah, there's this age-old adage of when you are trying to grow or trying to build something, especially when you go from scratch, there's these hard stops. And then there's these hard goes, and you're kind of back and forth and getting whipsawed back and forth. Like, shoot, we just had 3 associates that quit. Shoot, now we have 7 associates, but we only have 5 slots. Or, there's this ongoing, just the ebbs and flows of, especially when you're starting a business and running a business. Dallin and I know this because we're building our own business right now. And there's moments where it's like, oh, I'm getting completely run over. And then moments where it's crickets.
Right.
And figuring out how to level all that out can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. How do you generally try to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I get nervous when things are going well. So
There's a big tidal wave coming around the corner of some sort.
right, exactly. We just stay really intentional. We follow specific processes. We don't get in over our heads. We try not to overlove ourselves. We try not to, get ourselves into trouble as far as being high and dry with our associate commitments. I mean, like you said before, Ken, we're nobody without our providers. And so if we really stretch our organization thin from a provider standpoint, that's really risky. That's a volatile place to be in. And that makes me uncomfortable. Even though there are times where provider recruiting is light, we're still okay because maybe some of us owners work just a little bit harder, right? Not 5 days a week as of July. You can hold me accountable. But
All right.
we make sure we're intentional to not stretch ourselves thin to where it puts our patients in an uncomfortable spot, or our team, right? Because they rely on us for their livelihood. They expect us to show up to produce so that they can take a paycheck home and provide for their families.
That's exactly. I was just going to ask you a question around that, but you pretty much just answered it. And it's when things are slow or when they're very busy, that it can really cause challenges with a lot of the support team members, and they can sometimes tap out really quickly if they realize, oh shoot, like we don't have any patients coming in today, and I'm not going to be able to get a paycheck as a result of this. And they were hoping to have sort of a full-time job of some sorts. I'm curious, or I don't necessarily need to ask you a question here. I just am relating to you and thinking through what some of those challenges are with your team members and them having confidence that, hey, this is a job where I can get my 40 hours and I can make a good paycheck, and the paycheck isn't going to bounce, and all the other things that go with it.
Yeah, and I think our geographic footprint at this point in time makes it very easy to travel between practices. Some are further than others, some are more agreeable to others, but we try to incentivize for that too. We have the 40 hours if you like it. You just may have to travel 25 minutes to get it, but you will be compensated for gas, especially how gas prices are these days.
Yeah.
They are compensated to travel to support the other offices. And I think that it's helpful that we have a very clear vision. They understand what we're doing and they put the patients first. I mean, that's the foundation of we call them our little bosses. And they understand that without them, we can't help our little bosses, right? And without our little bosses, we don't have jobs. So we need little bosses and providers.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I've heard many times, just because I've been around clinicians for so long in my career, but I've heard a doctor say that he did a $2,000 day one day, and it was abysmal. It was just so hard, like he was stuck in mud. And then the next day, he did $8,000 to $10,000. And the difference there, it was the assistant and how well that assistant was trained and how well they worked together, and the communication and the time and effort that went into making all that happen. And like, those types of things are real. And when those assistants get really good, the doctors aren't going to want to let them go because they don't want to go back to the rough days where they just weren't in sync with the assistant. They hadn't been trained all the way and everything else that goes along with that. Have you experienced a little bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, our providers get possessive of certain assistants, but we try to have a very clear, consistent training protocol for all of our assistants. So at least they understand what it is from a clinical standpoint that they're being requested or what their aptitude is, right? So if Sarah's a white level, they know what skill set they have, or if they're a blue level, right? So we have different tiers of skills and we add to that all the time, but it makes it so that everybody understands if somebody's a certain level of training, then they know what their aptitude is. They know what to expect or what that assistant should be capable of doing.
That's an interesting classification system, like an interesting way to solve that. You've got your assistants on a tier level of skill so that the provider knows what they're getting when they start the day off.
Well, I can't take any credit for it. I got it from a good colleague of mine who was willing to share. And then we just kind of, changed it to fit our needs. So I can't take any credit, but it was a great thought. So
yeah.
Well,
I think
they
that
say
works
there's
great.
actually no original thought left in the universe. It's just us compiling them in different areas and applying them in different ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, as we're starting to wrap up here, I've got one more question for you. You and I had discussed this previously, but many of the listeners of the podcast are in a similar situation to you. So they're owning and running a dental group that's, I'm not going to say on the smaller side, but they're in like kind of that really difficult high growth phase where there's a lot of lessons that they have to learn via hard knocks. Do you think you could share with our listeners some of the tools that you've used in the past that have really helped your practice out? Like, does it need to be anything like big, grand? No one's ever heard of this before, but just like, what are the little things that have worked for Corey Hastings?
Yeah, great question. So I think consistency across our whole platform as far as our meeting cadence and how we structure our goals. We use, traction and L10 meetings across the board. So anybody can step into any meeting in the organization, know what the heck's going on. And so I think that coupled with our culture that we always are talking about, right? We talk about it every single day, gets everybody aligned and rowing in the same direction. Those two things in a nutshell are the simplest things that we've used that have really been impactful for our growth.
That's super insightful. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. I love it. We're big
Appreciate
culture guys too, Corey. We make our team read our core values regularly and everything else that goes with it.
It's super important, super important.
Amen. Well, then, as we're wrapping up, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share on our listeners? Any bow on the top of our conversation?
Yeah, I think if you're a provider and also a multi-location owner, or even just a single location owner, I mean, you could be the best producer in your practice, or you can build something that outgrows you, but just realize it's very hard to do both. So you have to commit to one.
Thank you very much. If any of our listeners are interested in what we've talked about today, they want to continue the conversation, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you, Corey?
Yeah, I think the best is just find me on LinkedIn, or you can call me. I'll give my cell phone out. It's 314-496-3562.
Wow. There's no way he just did that. No
Very
way.
good.
Brave soul, brave soul. Well, I appreciate you guys so much.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest here. Like your ability, like sort of, with these questions we were lobbing at you, like your ability to quickly assess and turn around with like really profound insights. It's clear you've been doing this for a while, and it's only somebody that's intentional can articulate at that type of a level. So it was really impressive to visit with you today.
I really appreciate that. That means a lot. And I always just hope I can provide, again, helpful content, because otherwise I don't want to waste your time or the listeners' time either.
No, I think this has been incredibly useful, very insightful, and also actionable. I think anyone listening to this episode could walk away with some real things they could do tomorrow to make their group better.
I appreciate that. Of
course. Well, to all of you listeners, hopefully you did get a couple of things you can do tomorrow to make your group better. But we appreciate you for listening, and we will see you next time on the Dental Truth Project.